Believe in afterlife awareness, and I do believe that Shanann and Nico and Bella and Cece have access. And
What did they say to me when they came to see me?
have they?
Yes.
And what did Cece say?
The first night when they found Shannon's body, I'm going to be honest with you, Dr. Phil. I was laying in the bed weeping so hard, talking to God, and I said, you know, I could just end my life now and go find my daughter. I had fallen asleep. The next morning, I get a phone call, and they found Shannon's body. I said, do you want me to identify her on the phone? And he said, yeah, you could do that. And I said, is she beautiful? He said, yes. I said, does she have black hair? And he said, yes. And I said, then you have my daughter. That night, I was laying in bed and I just felt a presence, and I heard my daughter. I felt her, and I heard her say, I love you, Mommy, and I'm sorry. She told me she was at peace. I finally fell asleep with my daughter at my presence, and she slept with me. I just felt her. The following day, I get a phone call, and they said, Sandy, we found your granddaughter, but we're not sure which one. And I said, Bella's a little taller. She's pretty slimmer. She's not, she don't got a little belly. And if you pull her hair up a little bit, because I do their hair, and it would be so long, you know, and then I realized all the oil, they would never know. So they said, who's the one that wears a pull-up? And I said, that would be Cece. They said, well, then we have Cece. And I said, well, keep going. I said, find my Bella. And 2 hours later, they did.
It was hard for them to even tell us. You know, you could hear it in their voices. I couldn't imagine trying to be in their shoes, trying to tell the parents what they just found. Yeah.
And it was 2 hours later that they said they had found
Yeah, she was
Bella.
at the bottom of the drum, and their skin was falling off as they were trying to get them out. Everybody needed so much therapy after that. Our hearts just go out to all of them that work so damn hard on this case.
And you felt Cece and Bella's presence.
I felt Cece's presence. She was first. And she goes, hiya, Nana. And I could see her, but in my mind, you know, but I could hear her. And she said, you've been always so good to us, Nana. And we love you with our soul. And I always took their face and kissed them all over. And she grabbed my face and just kissed me all over. And Shannon said, it's okay now. And we gave kisses, and she turns her to her left. And then Bella came in, and Bella went like kind of like, hi, Nana, you know, just like the way she, I don't know, just the way she did it, yeah. And she said, guess what, Nana? And I said, what, Bella? And she said, I can go to Walt Disney World anytime I want. And I said, that's right, Bella. That's right. She thanked us for loving her so much.
And that's how you remember those two?
Yes, after I saw Bella and Cece, and then Shannon was standing there. I could see her body, but like kind of like see-through, and then just her upper part turned, and then I couldn't see who was handing the baby to her, and she handed me my grandson, and looks just like Frankie. It's crazy, but looks just like Frankie.
The letter began simply, I begged her to come home. But the words that followed would haunt an entire generation of one family. Written by Sandra Rzucek, Shanann Watts' mother, it wasn't just a letter. It was a cry from the depths of a broken heart. A plea from a mother who had watched her daughter, her granddaughters, and her legacy ripped away in a single, unthinkable act. Sandra had always sensed something dark growing beneath the surface of Shanann's seemingly perfect marriage. She had seen the distance in her daughter's eyes, the tension in her voice when she spoke of Chris. But never, not in her worst nightmares, could she have imagined that her gentle son-in-law, the man who smiled so politely, would be capable of such horror. In her letter, Sandra wrote of sleepless nights and unanswered prayers, of the last phone call she had with Sean and before the trip to Colorado ended in tragedy. She wrote about how she begged Sean and to come home, sensing danger she couldn't name. A mother's intuition that came too late. When she received the call that Shanann was missing, Sandra's world began to collapse. And when the truth came out, when she learned that her daughter's life had been taken by the very man who promised to protect her, something inside her shattered beyond repair. This wasn't just the death of her child. It was the death of trust, of faith, of the future she had imagined for her family. This is the story of a mother's letter that echoed through a nation, and how her heartbreak revealed the darkest truth of all. Stay with us, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Dark Matters True Crime for more stories that uncover the pain behind the headlines. In her letter, Sandra Rzucek spoke about moments that now seemed like warnings whispered by fate. The quiet tension during family gatherings, the unease in Shanann's tone when Chris grew distant, and the way he seemed more like a shadow than a husband. Before everything fell apart, Shanann had tried to save what remained of her marriage. She wrote long messages to Chris, filled with love, hope, and fear. She wanted to believe the man she married was still there somewhere, beneath the cold stares and the silence that had crept into their home. But Chris had already checked out emotionally, drawn into a secret life that would destroy them all. Sandra remembered the last phone call she had with Shanann vividly. Her daughter's voice sounded tired, anxious, yet still determined to hold her family together. "Mom, we'll be okay," Shanann had said, but Sandra's instincts screamed otherwise. Mothers know when something isn't right, even when the words say otherwise. The letter revealed Sandra's guilt, the endless replaying of those final moments, wishing she had done more, said more, seen more. She blamed herself for trusting too much, for not realizing that behind Chris's calm smile hid a man ready to erase everything he claimed to love. Every time Sandra closed her eyes, she saw Shanann holding her daughters, Bella and Celeste, their laughter filling the air. Then she saw darkness, the kind that swallows everything good in its path. What haunted Sandra most wasn't just that she lost them, it was how it happened. Sandra Rzucek described the days before the tragedy as eerily quiet, a silence that didn't feel peaceful but heavy, suffocating. In her letter, she wrote that Shanann had seemed distant during their last texts, almost as if she was carrying a secret too painful to share. Still, she told her mom everything was fine. But Sandra knew her daughter too well, and the tone didn't match the words. Chris had become withdrawn. His messages to Shanann had turned cold, robotic, lacking affection. He avoided her calls, slept in separate rooms, and spent hours on his phone, lost in conversations with someone else. Shanann sensed the emotional distance, but she didn't know it had already turned deadly. Sandra wrote of her own torment, how she wished she had flown out to Colorado, how she wished she had insisted Shanann leave the house sooner. In her letter, she described feeling a dark pull, a mother's intuition telling her something tragic was about to unfold. But she pushed it aside, trusting that things would work themselves out. Then came the call. Shanann's friend, Nicole Atkinson, saying Shanann wasn't answering her phone or opening the door. Sandra's stomach dropped. Something inside her shattered in that instant. And as hours turned into panic, the silence she'd felt in her bones finally made sense. She didn't know it yet, but that silence wasn't the calm before reconciliation. It was the sound of destruction, the pause before a storm that would erase her daughter, her grandchildren, and her peace forever. The Rzucek family's nightmare was only beginning, and Sandra's letter captured every painful moment of what came next. Stay tuned for Chapter 4, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Dark Matters True Crime for more chilling real stories that deserve to be remembered. It was still dark when Sandra's phone began to ring. The moment she saw the number, her heart froze. It was Nicole Atkinson, Shanann's best friend. Sandra could hear the panic in Nicole's voice. Shanann wasn't answering her phone. The front door was locked. Her car, the one she never left behind, was still in the garage. Sandra's instinct screamed that something terrible had happened. She begged Nicole to call the police, to check every corner of the house, to not let anyone leave until Shanann was found. In her letter, Sandra wrote that this was the moment her world began to collapse, the moment she knew her daughter was gone. When police arrived, they found Shanann's purse, phone, and keys inside the home. Everything pointed to her still being there, yet she was nowhere to be found. The girls' beds were unmade. Their favorite blankets were missing. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath. Sandra called Chris repeatedly, begging him for answers. His responses were flat, emotionless. He said he didn't know where Shanann was, that maybe she'd gone to a friend's house or left in the night. But every word he said made Sandra's skin crawl. There was no panic in his voice, no grief, no urgency, only emptiness. Hours later, police body cam footage captured Chris wandering through the house, touching things, talking fast, as if rehearsing his story. Sandra watched that footage later, her heart breaking with every second. She had begged Shanann to come home, but the truth was unthinkable. Shanann had never left. As Sandra's letter continued, her words grew heavier, almost trembling off the page. She wrote about the unbearable hours that followed Shanann's disappearance, and how every new update seemed to cut deeper than the last. When Chris finally appeared on the local news, pleading for his family's return, Sandra knew in her heart that something was wrong. She described watching him on TV, his face blank, his eyes dry, his tone detached. "No man who loves his family sounds like that," she wrote. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't grieving. He was performing. And deep down, Sandra feared she was watching a killer pretend to be a husband. Then came the confession. The words that destroyed her world all over again. Chris admitted to taking Shanann's life. And worse, he revealed what he had done to Bella and Celeste, their two precious granddaughters. Sandra's heart broke beyond repair. Her letter recounted how she fell to her knees, gasping for air, screaming until there was nothing left inside her. She said she had begged God for it to be a lie, for someone to wake her from the nightmare. But the nightmare was real. Her daughter was gone. Her grandchildren were gone. And the man responsible was the one Shanann had loved most. Sandra wrote that this was the moment her faith shattered, not in God, but in humanity. She couldn't understand how anyone could smile at her table, hug her grandchildren, and still harbor that kind of darkness. Sandra's pain wasn't just in losing them. It was in knowing she had trusted the man who destroyed them. Stay with us for Chapter 6, as Sandra's letter turns from grief to fury. And if you believe Shanann and her girls deserve to be remembered, like this video and subscribe to Dark Matters True Crime. By the time Sandra reached the middle of her letter, her sorrow had evolved into something fierce. Anger. Not the kind that fades, but the kind that burns quietly in the soul. She wrote that the grief had been unbearable, but what made it worse was the betrayal. She had welcomed Chris into her family, trusted him with her daughter's heart, and loved him like a son. To realize he had used that trust as a mask was something she said she would never forgive. Sandra described how every memory of him now felt poisoned. Birthdays, holidays, dinners, all replayed in her mind like scenes from a horror film where the villain was hiding in plain sight. "He smiled at us while he planned to destroy us," she wrote, "and we never saw it coming." In her letter, she condemned his cowardice, how he had blamed Shanann and in his first story, claiming she was the one who harmed the girls. That lie, Sandra said, broke her completely. It wasn't just murder. It was character assassination. Even in death, Shanann was forced to defend herself from the man who stole everything from her. Sandra's rage came not only from the act itself, but from the world's fascination with Chris afterward. People called him handsome, charming, and even misunderstood. To Sandra, it was another knife to the heart. "There's nothing misunderstood about evil," she wrote. "It knows what it's doing." But beneath that anger was something powerful, a vow, a promise to never let Shanann, Bella, or Celeste's story fade into silence. In the final pages of her letter, Sandra Rzucek's words turned from pain to purpose. She wrote about the long nights when she couldn't sleep, haunted by memories of Shanann's laughter echoing through the house, or the sound of her granddaughters playing in the background during phone calls. Those sounds were gone now, replaced by a silence so deep it felt alive. But Sandra made a vow. "As long as I breathe, I will speak their names." She promised never to let their story fade into the cold archives of true crime. For her, this wasn't just about grief, it was about legacy. Shanann, Bella, and Celeste deserved to be remembered not as victims, but as symbols of love, hope, and the danger of ignoring red flags. Sandra wrote that she often revisited old videos Shanann and had posted online, the ones where she spoke proudly about her family, her business, her faith. Watching them was bittersweet. They were reminders of what was lost, but also proof that Shanann had lived her life with strength and passion. What weighed on Sandra most was the what if. What if Shanann had left sooner? What if someone had seen the truth in Chris's eyes before it was too late? Those questions had no answers, only pain. But Sandra's promise gave her strength, to turn her suffering into a warning for others, to help other families see the signs her daughter never could. Evil may have taken them, she wrote, but it didn't win. I won't let it. Sandra Rzucek ended her letter with trembling words. A message not just for the world, but for her daughter. Shanann, you were light. Even when the world dimmed, you glowed. It was her final goodbye, but also her declaration of love, echoing across years of grief and disbelief. She spoke about how the tragedy didn't just end one family's story, it fractured generations. The Rzuceks still wake up every day to a world that feels colder, emptier. Holidays that once burst with laughter now carry a painful silence. But Sandra wrote that through that pain, something beautiful began to rise. Purpose. Shanann's legacy became more than the tragedy that took her. It became a movement, a reminder to listen to intuition, to speak up when something feels wrong, and to cherish the people you love while they're still here. Sandra's letter became a voice for mothers everywhere who had lost children to violence. She ended her message not with bitterness, but with love, the kind of love that evil could never erase. He may have taken their lives, she wrote, but he can never take their light. I see them in every sunrise, every dream, every quiet moment when the world feels still. Her final words were a plea, not for revenge, but for remembrance. For everyone who reads her letter to carry Shanann's story forward, to never let her daughter's laughter be forgotten. Because in the end, Sandra's heartbreak became her strength, and her love became her weapon against the darkness. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in justice, and subscribe to Dark Matters True Crime. Every week, we tell the stories of those whose voices deserve to be heard, and whose light refuses to fade.